Well, I think you'll agree with me that it doesn't take much investigation or deliberation to recognize that ours is an era in which some of the worst qualities of human nature have come to the fore. And we see all these things to our dismay. Our capacity for cruelty and violence, for vanity and greed, for deception, strife, jealousy, selfish ambition, anger, vengeance, love of honor and power, self-deception. Need I go on? Let's call these some of the darker aspects of the human psyche. And it's not hard to feel that the rawness of this condition will be hard to overcome. The hatred of one group for another, hated groups, others, pick our group, immigrants, Democrats, Republicans, Southerners, Northerners, coastal elites, you liberals, you conservatives, not to mention Jews, African Americans, Latinos, Asians, persistent racism in all of its many and insidious forms. It's a very sorry picture, isn't it? Is there an alternative? Can one group come to look positively on another group, especially when that other group is and has been our enemies? For example, can Israelis as a society come to care about Palestinians and their well-being? And can Palestinians as a society come to care about Israelis, Jews, and their well-being? And this is not simply a rhetorical question. Now, the Bible, it seems to me, has an answer to this question. And it is, in my view, a stunning answer. An answer that has its origin in our Torah portion for this week, Parshat Shemot, the first portion of the book of Exodus, and especially the first 2 chapters of that great seminal book. And I want to briefly explore this answer with you this evening. And the answer comes in 2 episodes dominated by 5 women who saved the day. 2 of them prevent the slaughter of Israelite baby boys long before God and Moses and the plagues enter the scene. Another 3 women prevent the disappearance before he has a chance to walk of Moses, thus making it possible for him one day to go to Pharaoh and then lead the Israelites out of Egypt. I want to read these 2 brief episodes for you. First, from chapter 1. The king of Egypt spoke to the midwives of the Hebrews. One of them was named Shiphrah, and the other was named Puah, saying, when you deliver the Hebrew women, look at the birth stool. If it is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let her live. The midwives, fearing God, did not do as the king of Egypt had told them. And one commentator says about this phrase, fearing God, that since they are Egyptians, it's unlikely that they are fearing or revering the God of the Israelites. And this scholar suggests that fearing God in the Bible refers to conscience, the ability to look within and to discern values. The midwives, fearing God, did not do as the king of Egypt told them. They let the boys live. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, "Why have you done this thing, letting the boys live?" And the midwives said to Pharaoh, "Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They are vigorous. Before the midwives can come to them, they have given birth." They stand up to the Pharaoh and offer a rationalization, a rationale for what they have done. The second story comes from chapter 2. A certain man of the house of Levi went and married a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw how beautiful he was, she hid him there for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she got a wicker basket for him and caulked it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child into it and placed it among the reeds by the bank of the Nile River. And his sister, Moses' sister, stationed herself at a distance to learn what would befall him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the Nile while her maidens walked along the Nile. She spied the basket among the reeds and sent her slave girl to fetch it. Now we have to pay attention to what comes next. When she opened it, she saw that it was a child, a boy crying, and she took pity on it. And she said, "This must be a Hebrew child." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get a Hebrew nurse to suckle the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter answered, "Yes." So the girl went and called the child's mother. And the Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I will pay your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed it. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, who made him her son. She named him Moses, explaining, "I drew him out of water." What do these stories tell us? That amidst the tyranny of the Pharaoh who knew not Joseph, there were brave women, Egyptian women, according to one significant interpretation, who were willing to stand up against the tyranny and against the tyrannical social order that the Pharaoh had established, and as Egyptians came to care about and protect Israelites. And to what extent? Even the daughter of Pharaoh herself was involved. That is, a person from the very palace, or as we might say, from the very control center of the tyranny itself. And the author dramatizes that Egyptian capacity for empathy toward the enemy by saying that she took pity on the child, even though she knew he was a Hebrew child. What reach of the imagination this exemplifies. And therefore, that by expressing pity, she gives recognition to the dignity of the enemy, and by extension, to the aspirations of the enemy, if only to let that Hebrew boy live. Egyptians helping Israelites. Egyptians assuming the dignity of the other. The enemy, other, to boot. And later, much later, the biblical author reverses that tribute, now not extolling the Egyptians, but the Israelites, and expressing on behalf of the Israelite author favor on the Egyptians. Now think about what I'm about to read. In Deuteronomy chapter 22, we find the following. "You shall not abhor an Egyptian." Why? "Because you were strangers in his land. That the Egyptians manifested one of the chief biblical and Jewish virtues, hachnasat orchim, hospitality. After all, it was only after 400 years that arose a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph. For that nearly half a millennium, the Egyptians offered hospitality to the Israelites. And therefore, we are enjoined not to abhor an Egyptian. And later, in the book of the prophet Isaiah, we read after several paragraphs, each of which begins in that day by Yom Hahu. The prophet comes forth with these astonishing words. In that day, Israel shall become a partner with Egypt and Assyria, two of the central enemies of the Israelites in biblical literature. In that day, Israel shall become a third partner with Egypt and Assyria as a blessing on earth. For the Lord of hosts will bless them, saying, and here the author outdoes him or herself. Blessed be my people, Egypt, my handiwork, Assyria, and my very own Israel. I want to read that again from Isaiah chapter 19. In that day, Israel shall be a third partner with Egypt and Assyria as a blessing on earth. For the Lord of hosts will bless them, saying, Blessed be my people, Egypt, my handiwork, Assyria, my very own Israel. Enemies becoming partners. What a vision. And so, who are the heroes of these narratives? Well, it seems to me there are many. Two Israelites, mother and daughter, Yocheved and Miriam. Three Egyptians, two midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, and the daughter of Pharaoh. These Egyptians come from the camp of the enemy, the paradigm enemy of biblical literature. And they display the capacity to reach over the barrier and to see the humanity, the dignity, the aspirations of those whom they are supposed to despise. And they feel real human emotion, pity, concern for the enemy. 5 heroes. But to me, the greatest hero of them all is the author of these passages. Writers who dared to expose the terrifying limits of us versus them thinking, and to present a model, an image that transcends these limitations. And if you can say it, it may happen. Writers who dared to think themselves into the humanity of the enemy and to recognize their humanity, that they are fundamentally like us with real emotions, life-affirming values, dignity, honor, empathy. Yes, the history of humankind is riddled with us versus them animosity, with war and bloodshed, mutual recrimination, with the dehumanization of the other, and worse, thinking the other to be barbarians and savages and vermin. But the biblical author from time to time lifts us out of this stalemate, out of this abyss, and shows us the possibility of enemies becoming allies. The biblical author from time to time shows us that animosity and aggression and hatred need not be forever, that deep down, human beings of goodwill all want the same thing: health, the well-being of their families, opportunity, hope, calm, friendship, and that there are people of goodwill everywhere. If only we have the will to look for this, to see it, and to cultivate it. And the biblical author shows us, through poignant drama and through soaring vision, that such cooperation and concord is possible. If only we would have the courage to work toward breaking the depressing cycle of violence and hatred.